Just let folks get their final seats taken. Well, first and foremost, I want to thank you all for taking time out of your evening to attend our Transportation Founders Fund Speaker Series. We have an exciting program for you. My name is Mark Dunzo, and I am the chair of the ITRI Advisory Board. We had a wonderful meeting earlier today where we got to hear about all the awesome things that are going on at ITRI. These are exciting times. Our executive director is stepping down, but with change comes opportunities. And so very exciting times. And likewise, thanks to the staff of ITRI and all the researchers and folks and contributors. Just a lot of great things going on, a lot of valuable contributions to the community. So with that, I'd like to introduce John Horowitz, who is the Assistant Vice Chancellor for the Office of Research, Innovation, and Economic Development, who will say some welcoming remarks on behalf of the university.
Hi, everybody. On behalf of the Vice Chancellor for Research, Alan Rebar, I'd like to welcome all of you, but especially our very special guest and speaker today, Maureen McAvey, to Centennial Campus and NC State University. But I would also like to thank each of you for your continued support of the Transportation Founders Fund and more generally, transportation research and education at NC State. As you well know, TFF serves as a platform for the enrichment of transportation research and education across NC State and the state for that matter. But it also enables professionals from around the state to meet with transportation leaders, and that's truly important. But perhaps what's less well understood is that TFF is a product of a very close partnership between ITRI and the Department of Civil Construction and Environmental Engineering. At NC State, we highly support and value such collaborations. Now, what you probably also don't know is that this is the 13th consecutive year that TFF has brought national transportation leaders to NC State. But today's event is particularly special because it's going to be the last where Nagi will be serving as director of ITRI. So as such, I want to take advantage of this auspicious occasion to thank Nagi for his 15 years of service as a director and for all of his contributions to NC State. So Nagi, if you'll join me at the podium, I'd like to present you with a small and very poorly wrapped token of the university's appreciation.
Okay, well, I get the pleasure of introducing our speaker. I'll also be the third person to thank you all for coming. There are a lot of really busy people in the room, but I guarantee you that when we're all done here, that you're going to feel like you had a very good return on investment for the time that you spent here. I also want to thank Julie Paul, the Executive Director of ULI Triangle. She couldn't be here, but we wouldn't have Maureen here if it wasn't for Julie. She really helped us hone in on a speaker. So, our speaker tonight is Maureen McAvey, and I need these. Maureen is Bucksbaum Family Chair for Retail at the Urban Land Institute in Washington, D.C. She concentrates on urban retail and has led several special projects around demographics and future urban development. She is also a senior staff advisor to ULI's Building Healthy Places initiative. She's been with ULI since 2001, with the number date correct, and she's held many positions there. Lots of notable publications, so if you like what you hear, go to ULS site, and I think you can find some of those publications. She's also been involved in several public and private sector leadership positions related to land use and development. She holds 2 master's degrees, one from University of Minnesota and the other from the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard. She is a frequent national and international speaker, is engaged in dialogues in India and France, as well as participated in conferences in China and Japan and throughout the U.S. She's also, I learned today, an avid reader, and And there's a bit of advice that's probably not in her presentation that she might give you, and that is to put down your devices, turn off your TVs, and grab a good book. But with that, I will turn the podium over to Maureen.
And I will add my thank you, and thank you to Billy. It was very nice not only to come here, but to experience the nice weather. I was in Phoenix yesterday. On Tuesday, I left Washington, D.C. in the morning. It was 26-degree wind chill and drizzly and nasty. Got to Phoenix. It was 94. And we were standing outside in the sun looking at some projects and talking to some people. And I said, could we at least go in the shade? And then I took a red-eye last night to come here. And it was raining this morning when I landed at 57. And now it is spectacular. And Billy was kind enough to walk me through your extraordinary library and drive a little bit around to see how much progress you keep making here. So very impressive. So what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about some of the research that we do at ULI. Encourage you, as Billy did, to go to our website. You can download anything for free. If you want lots of copies, we charge you, but not a lot. And a lot of the research we do is the kind of thing that you would like. It is statistically accurate. We're quite careful about what we do. And we're doing some things that will be coming out shortly that are right up your alley. Within the next 2 weeks, we'll publish Active Transportation, which is all about biking, walking, etc. We've done a big initiative, which Billy mentioned, on building healthy places, which is again about active transportation, urban planning, etc. And we've done some statistically accurate studies where we actually surveyed millennials or Gen Y on what they are doing, not just what the pundits think they're doing, which is not always the same. So let's take off, and I will leave time for questions and perhaps answers. But come with me while we go. So what I'm going to cover today is sort of an eclectic mix of things that I think are at work that are changing how we relate real estate, transportation, urban planning. I really do believe we're at the dawning of a new age in terms of what's going on. It will be, as a friend of mine says, sort of gritchy, which is not recently paved, not in the fast lane. This is going to be messy, but it's an amazing time. And so the first issue I would talk about, and you see this a lot, many of you know this chart on the right. This is the American Society of Civil Engineers, who do optimistically say that things are getting slightly better, that we've gone from F to D, even D plus, in a couple of areas. But we do need to continue, and this looks at everything from bridges, water, sewer, et cetera. So it's across the board infrastructure. Some of this improvement is because during the recession, as bad as all of that was, we did have TARP money, we had Tiger Grant money, and the federal government did, slosh money downhill, so to speak, to some of the states. So some stuff got done. I was talking to Secretary Tennyson earlier. The amount of work that needs to be done, this is not even a shadow of it. And I would add, you all know this, that we are competing internationally, and largely they don't care whether we do this work or not. We do what we need to do in this country to make ourselves better and to be competitive internationally. And, we need to mind our own business in some respects, as opposed to just, arguing with each other, because nobody cares if we argue. So when we think about what's improving, one of the things that's striking to me is how much we are able to improve management. We're in the era of big data. So we now have an opportunity to look at all sorts of information and make toll roads more efficient. I'm sure you have it here. We have traffic and weather on the 8s on one of the radio stations. So in real time, you can find out where there's a traffic jam, where there's a crash, where there's repair being done, so that you actually can make your commute far better. That's really a result of brand new data that is able to be tracked, whether you're on TV, whether you're on your computer, whether you're on your cell phone, or whether you're hearing it on the radio. So big data allows us to do stuff that, frankly, we couldn't do 10 years ago. And I think we're going to see more and more of that. We're going to see more integrated transit, more systems. And part of that is what a friend of mine likes to call intentionality. Are we really thinking in system terms and thinking intentionally about where we want to go 10 years, 15 years down the road, and then stepping it back? Because oftentimes when we say, here's where I want to be, everybody says you can't get there, too much money. We were talking earlier, since some legislators have 2-year horizons, we need to find a way of giving that legislator a win. Otherwise, we're not going to get it done. So we've got opportunities. We need to think differently and manage differently. So we're able, with all this smart infrastructure, to literally change not only what is happening, but how it is happening. We've got smart meters all over the place. You can use your credit card to pay for your parking. We're going to have driverless cars faster than anybody can imagine. I don't know how we're going to adjust some of the lawsuits that will come out of this. And some of the policy is going to be very gritty, as I say. But the technology is already there. We've got driverless cars. Figuring out how they integrate with people like me still out there driving my car, how we figure out the legality of who gets sued if I hit that car or that car hits me, those are different issues. But we've got the technology. And think about what driverless cars will mean for elderly people, for people who have a hard time getting around as they age, as they lose sight, as they lose the quickness of their reflexes, as they're handicapped, etc. Huge changes. Think how much money we're going to be able to start to save if we do not have to build 5 parking stalls per 1,000 square feet, 7 per 1,000 square feet, because it's much more, we're much more able to essentially call a car on demand, and it will take us where we want to go. And we don't have to have all those cars sitting around in the sun doing nothing. So opportunities abound, and we see this again, even though we've still got legal issues to work out with Uber, Lyft, Cars to Go, etc. And I'll say in the millennial generation, a lot of the millennials, frankly, are more than happy to experiment with some of these opportunities. And cities, these are both examples out of San Francisco. There's a phone app that tells you where to park. As soon as you have to give it permission to figure out where you are, and then it tells you where you can park. Many of the airport parking facilities are now doing this, where you walk in and it tells you, or you drive in and it tells you how many parking stalls are available on each floor. And as you go down the corridor, it tells you where parking stalls are available. So it saves time, gas, again, technology at work. So when we think about opportunities, you see the toll roads, we're failing in many ways thinking about the big issues and how we're going to fund what I would call big infrastructure. But we're getting better at doing small things and figuring out how Northern Virginia is able to separate itself in some respects from its legislature, who is dominated by what we used to call outstate, and fund itself in public-private partnerships, toll lanes, to reduce the incredible congestion on Highway 66 in Northern Virginia. We're going to see more of that because it makes sense. The citizenry is demanding it. Someone asked me yesterday, do we see policy coming from the top down or the bottom up? My real answer is both. Because as congestion gets worse, the people are going to say, hey, quit arguing, fix it, help me. And there are leaders out there who are going to say, let me think of a better way to do this, as opposed to continuing to just say, there's nothing that we can do about it. So we're going to see more and more cross-border activity. I was saying to the Secretary of Transportation, Secretary Tennyson, former secretary, because he's also former mayor of Durham. Here's an example. This was part of the study that they did for 2035 on a joint county basis, still not fully funded, but the fact that the counties are getting together and looking out to 2035, this is progress. This is what we can start to do if we have leadership and intentionality. So let's talk about a little bit, because I'll thread it in throughout my discussion, this millennial group. They are waiting to get driver's licenses, more so than any generation in the past. Why is that? It's a combination of things. Number one, they don't have a car. They can't afford the car in many respects, and the insurance, and the parking, and all of that. Or their parents aren't crazy about footing that bill. And they're not so sure they want it, because many of them are flocking to locations, not just in the cities, but in that first and second ring suburb, where they don't need a car all the time. So they can use Uber, Lyft, transit, cars to go, etc., bicycling, walking, for a lot of their trips. And when they need it, they can get further. But they're living in circles, if you will, where they don't need a car for much of their daily life. A very interesting idea where they say, I'd rather bike or walk. So I hope that they will all be far more fit as they age than some of us who are wearing Fitbit to, give us a little incentive to keep going. The other reason is this simple fact. The Federal Reserve Bank did a study a couple years ago that said for every car the household does not need to own, you're saving about $8,000 a year. So think about, in a 2-adult household, if you can get by with one car, you can put $100,000 more into that house. You can put that money into the education fund for your child. That is a major savings. And increasingly, married couples of all sorts, are saying, can't we get by on one car and figure out, I'll drop you at the bus station or I'll pick you up? We're thinking differently about this because it's no longer a status symbol. And you see, especially in this part of the world, where BMW, where a number of other companies, the car companies, are thinking about what is their future. What are they going to manufacture in the future and use the intelligence and technology that they have, going beyond cars. And we'll see more and more of that, I believe. So let's talk about what America looks like these days. We have a very rapidly growing population. We are the 8th fastest growing country in the world as a rate of growth. So we're right up there with Indonesia, with parts of Asia, with parts of Africa, on a rate of growth basis, not obviously in whole numbers. We have about 324 million people in the country today. So that number is really broken down. The biggest two groups are the baby boomers and the millennials, soon to be followed by Gen Z, or the iGen, as some people call them. The boomers are, sad to say, starting to decline in population. Sad to say, many of the boomers, and I have lost several friends, I am a boomer, are starting to die from car crashes, from cancer, from brain tumors, etc. So the boomers, which have historically been the elephant in the snake, our numbers are dwindling a little bit, where the millennials, or Gen Y, is still growing in population because immigrants come, legal and illegal immigrants. So we're seeing that generation growing, and we want these young people to come because they're working, they're bringing ideas, they're bringing energy from other places. So that generation is growing and will continue for quite some time. The millennial generation is, round numbers, from about 20 to the top end is at 37, 38. And the big question is, what will they do as they get a little bit older? They're starting to be, now that they're in their 30s, in the household formation stage. They're coupling up. They're even getting married, because many of the young women say to these young men, beloved of my life, if we're going to have a baby, honey, as that Taylor Swift song, put a ring on it. If we're going to have a baby, I want to know that we're married. I want to know that, I can get a divorce and you still have to pay for this little baby. I love you dearly, honey, but put a ring on it. So they're getting married and they're starting to buy homes. And they're buying condos, they're buying townhouses. 83% of the young couples who have bought houses own single-family homes, which tells you, as while we are densifying, we are still attracted to our single-family homes. So if you look at the generations, as I mentioned, the millennials are in that child forming, or that coupling up period, household formation period, so they are the most likely group to move. Gen Xers are a small generation. Partially these generations, that's about a 15-year generation. Each of these generations is categorized by the pivotal things that happened. So you'll see the generations, whether it was Vietnam, whether it was 9/11, whether it was the internet coming to sweep across our country, across the world. So the generations are not neatly and precisely, 18 years and 6 months. It's a more nuanced discussion about how the generations are broken down. But Gen X is a smaller generation. And they are worried about their parents who are aging, and they are worried about getting their kids through college as college continues to grow in expense. So they are not as likely to move in the next 5 years when we did our survey work. The boomers we've talked about, they are downsizing in many cases. One of the things that AARP has done, they did an extensive survey of boomers, and 88% of the boomers say they want to age in place. What do they mean by that? They don't necessarily mean they want to stay in that house or that condo. Some of them do. But many of them want to stay in that community where they are familiar, where they have their doctors, where their children and grandchildren may live, but they want to downsize. So again, go to driverless cars, go to walkability, go to access, to a kind of community that allows that person, as they age in place, to live a full life. We call these communities now active adults. My mom is 102. She is no longer an active adult. But we are increasingly dividing what used to be thought of as old age into 3 parts. 70 to 80 is active adulthood, early old age. 80 to 90, most people are still pretty fit. They're wearing down a little bit. They're not quite as active. 80 to 90, traveling a little more slowly. When you hit your 90s, we're starting to see a big tick up in healthcare costs, in mobility issues, access issues, and in some cases the desire or need for some type of either in-home care or going to assisted living, continuing care communities, etc. So 30 years now, potentially, of old age, if you will, in a very different format than we've seen it in the past. If you don't own long-term care insurance, write yourself a big note tonight, because you will likely need it. Increasingly, you will need it for 4 years or more. So this is a big issue. And as a country, we're not doing anything about it at the moment, which I won't go into. And we see in our study work and our survey data that in a statistically accurate survey of across the board of the generations, that 50% of all the adults indicate that they want a walkable environment because they simply want that opportunity to walk for recreation, to do small errands, to live in a community where they might be able to get something without getting in the car for every single thing that they're doing. As you can imagine, more of the millennials and more of the renters are interested in walkability. They're the two largest groups. We're seeing new home sizes shrink. Part of this is that we're seeing these clustered communities. We're seeing residential below and office above, retail below and residential above, retail below and office above. So these mixed-use communities don't have such big apartments up above. And people are enjoying that. Almost 80% of all the households in America do not have children under 18 years of age. That number is 78% today, creeping up to 80%. So if you aren't worried about where these children are going to go to school, where they're going to play in the backyard, you're not as concerned about having that single-family detached house. And since people are living so much longer, many of the empty nesters who are 50s, 60s, 70 years old, they say, honey, loved the 4-bedroom, 3-bath house, great, been there, done that. Let's move into something that's where we can go to dinner if we want, we can close the door and go to Italy for a month, we can go see the kids for a month. I want a different environment. This is what's fueling that, and the houses are smaller then. The dwelling units are smaller, and we'll continue to see this. This relates to the income curve. When you're young, these are median income numbers, which are a little sobering from across the country. So we're seeing household income. So this is a couple in whatever circumstance they might be a couple. So on the 25 to 34, the millennial group, 55,000. The Gen X group starts to be 67,000. The big peak earning years are, part Gen X, part Xers and part Boomers, 70,000. It starts to slow down after that, and obviously once you're 65 and over, your household income is getting significantly less. Here is the slide that you might remember. If we look at the data on median family net worth, look at that 65 and over number. 70 percentile is under 350,000 net worth. So family net worth. So if people are living to be 90, this is a huge issue because of the cost of housing, which is again why if I can then save $8,000 a year and not have a car for every person in the household, if I can live in a clustered environment so I can walk more, if I can reduce my housing costs, we are going to see more and more of that. To put it differently, the Federal Reserve did a big survey and reported family net worth in 2012 for people 65 to 74, $206,000. Family net worth. Shocking. Now, some of that has come back up because, of course, the stock market, that was the middle of the recession, so housing prices have come back up. We've seen stock market come back up, but we haven't seen these numbers double or triple. So, as I say, think about going home and saving more money. Don't go out to dinner tonight. Save your money. So, if we look at who's going to move in the next several years, most of these are people who are currently renting and the millennials. And they will seek housing that works for them, largely, not totally, because the other thing that we see is we are a land of choice. And because we now all have smartphones, we can all find exactly, precisely what it is we want. If I want a pair of black slacks that have an inseam of this and are made of a certain fabric and have a side zip and 2 pockets in the back, I could sit here in front of you and find those slacks on my smartphone. And you'd be bored watching me, but I could definitely do it. And it means that people are able to find what it is they want, and they will look largely until they find it, including at many of the income groups. Not at the very lowest income group, because there's not that much choice. But for the other 80%, people will typically find what it is they want and need. So we are seeing denser homes, both in suburbs and denser communities, and certainly in the core cities. 25% of the millennials say that they are looking to build or to live in a duplex or townhome in the next 5 years. So we're starting to see high amenity apartments. These are pictures I took yesterday in Phoenix from a fancy apartment complex. This is public areas within the project I looked at, because people come downstairs, there's a barbecue there, they hang out, they meet their other neighbors, both empty nesters at the over 55 folks and the millennials. There's this lovely pool. It was very nicely designed so that there is sun all parts of the day, and there's sun and shade all parts of the day around this pool. You have to have a business center, you have to have conference rooms, a fancy kitchen within the unit. I don't know if anybody cooks, to tell you the truth, but the cooktop and the granite counter, very nice. Lobby seating areas. The big thing is trading space for place. Many of these units are 800 square feet, 700 square feet. The big unit is 1,100 square feet. They might have carved 2 bedrooms into it, but they are small bedrooms. This is not the Texas King, I can tell you, because you couldn't walk. You'd have to get in the room, walk on top of the bed to lay down. So these are small units, and we are seeing that people are choosing trading space for place so that these common areas become extremely important. The other thing to know is millennials all have pets. Now, some of the sociologists believe that because many of these children grew up as single children or one other sibling. So you leave your home beloved by your parents, spoiled by your parents, and who loves you almost as much as your mom? A golden retriever. So these young people have dogs. Many of them, you might think that if they're going to say, hey, you want to stop and grab a beer tonight? The answer is, I'll meet you in an hour. I have to go walk my dog first, and then I'll meet you downtown in an hour. Dogs. So all these units have dog walks. They are built with dog areas so that you have all these little dogs in the units, and I kid you not, many of the building management companies now take DNA of your dog so that if you have droppings from your dog in the dog area that you are not cleaning up, initially you are fined, you get 2 fines, and then you're kicked out because they can tell who's doing this. This is a whole new management system. And it's true, by the way. So we see not only this happening in the residential world, we're seeing it in the workspace as well. We are seeing private work areas become much more cozy. We used to have cube farms. We used to have private offices, no more. In walking through the library, Billy was kind enough to give me a terrific tour of all the floors of the library. Many offices look like that now, where they're open plan, there are no private offices, there are conference areas, both small conference areas for 2 and 4 people, bigger conference spaces, a variety of tables and chairs, in some cases sort of little small work tables that have wrapped acoustic fabric around them so we could meet and not be overheard. But we are seeing a shrinkage in personal workspace, and we see a continued proliferation of what we all call third places. What is a third place? Starbucks. At ULI, I can go across the street to a place called Baked and Wired, and as you can imagine, lots of tea, lots of great coffee, cupcakes, and nothing that's under 1,000 calories. And I see our staff sitting over there with their computer. It's a clue if you are coming along. Say, hey, John, they close the computer. Not working. They were not working. They might have been exploring where to vacation, what movies are on. Not working. If the computer lid stays up, good sign. Third places. And we are seeing more and more and more of that, and it's incorporated into the workplace. So the average space per employee has fallen by half, is likely to continue to fall. We are seeing the big companies, Google, Yelp, Facebook, all of these companies that employ a large number of young people are going to amenity-rich urban locations. Not all in the core city, but in these urbanized suburbs. IBM moving out of White Plains. Microsoft moving into downtown Seattle for many of their employees. So we are seeing this trend, and it will only continue. We see it in the law firms, the accounting firms as well. And it raises all sorts of problems, by the way, but that's a different issue. These are pictures I took yesterday in Phoenix. The one that's most interesting is this Seed Spot. You can go into Seed Spot, and you can go into this one on the far on your left, which is called Mod, and you see the young woman with the bright green hair in the back there. You can go into Mod, and you can rent space for $9 an hour. You simply bring your own computer. You can. There's all sorts of places to wire up. Bring your own smartphone, $9 an hour. Because Phoenix is so spread out, many business people stop in at Mod, and they have a membership, and then they can use the conference rooms, because if they were to go back to their office, it's 30, 40 minutes away. So they become members of Mod. And there's assigned parking for the Mod people, and there are all sorts of different kinds of space. Seed Spot is essentially an incubator generator. And so you can come in, again on a membership basis, look to do a startup company, and they periodically have meetings by patent attorneys, by regular attorneys in terms of business startups. How do you register your business with the Secretary of State? How do you get angels and venture capitalists to fund your business? And so they are encouraging businesses to grow, not only by young people, but again by some of these empty nesters, not so much by Gen X, but by many of these empty nesters say, you know what, I've had enough of the big corporate hoopla. We've got some money, honey beloved of my life. Let's take a risk here. And they're starting companies. And they're looking for these amenity-rich locations. 1 out of every 3 laborers these days is a millennial. And we are seeing some of this conflict because we have 4, in some cases 5 generations actively in the workplace. So if you look at the law firms, at the engineering firms, at the architects, the name on the door might be someone in their 70s or 80s. But it's the signature name on the door. You know, many of the top attorneys are pushing 78, 80. The firm is named for that person. So they're still in the workforce. and people want them. The boomers are in the workforce, Gen X is in the workforce, and we see the millennials in the workforce. They all have different values, different work ethics, believe that their benefits and contributions are different and should be valued as such, which is why we're seeing very different housing, lots of choice and options relative to the workspaces, and lots of conflict. We had a guy in our office who no longer works with us. I asked him, because we were in a real rush situation 2 years ago, could you work late Thursday night? We desperately need to get some pivot tables done to get the project done on time. And he said, oh, I can't. I play soccer on Thursday night. And I said, is it a tournament game? No, but I play soccer on Thursday night. And I said, well, could you find a substitute? I've never asked you to work late. This is really a big deal. We really need to get this done. He says, well, I'm really not comfortable doing that. And he was this chipper and, it's not a problem for me, Maureen. That's my soccer night. And I was flabbergasted. I came from a generation, partially, I was the first woman in many of the positions I held of substance. So we worked. And so it wouldn't have occurred to me to say to my boss, I go out with the girls on Thursday night. I go bowling Thursday night. Are you kidding me? I would have said, oh, sure, fine, I'll do that. Yeah, great. So he's no longer with us. But that is the type of, and there were more issues, but it's the type of issues we are seeing actively in the workplace. And so we are seeing residential, retail, workspaces, transit, trying to adapt and adopt to all these changes in our demographics. So let's talk for a minute about retail. Retail these days is all about experience. If I can order all my paper towels, all my cans of peas and tomato sauce on the internet, why do I go to retail? I go to retail to be with you, to have lunch, to have dinner, to have a drink, to have my nails done, to have services, to have food, to have experience. And we are seeing that even on Black Friday, the biggest shopping day or increasingly the shopping week of the year, everybody is plugging in to the internet. So they're all using their smartphone, even the baby boomers, even the people over 65. Obviously, the millennials are doing it the most. And we are seeing, this is a very good study by A.T. Kearney, a big consulting company. They break the shopping journey into 5 sections: research, test and trial, purchase, fulfillment, which means you get what you paid for, and return. 90% of shoppers engage a physical store at some point in the shopping journey, which means, again, that this notion of being proximate, this notion of easy access is critically important to the retail industry, because I might do research online and then go get whatever it is I want. I may go look at it in the store and then order it online, because if I order it online, God bless, Amazon's going to bring it to me and I don't have to worry about lugging it home. If I do go into the store to get it, I have instant gratification, which is also why Amazon is moving to faster and faster and faster delivery. Same-day delivery in some zip codes. Think about logistics, about transportation, about infrastructure. Young people say, oh, it's so good I'm not driving to get all these things, I have it delivered. Excuse me? How many cardboard boxes come to your home every day? How many UPS trucks come to your home every day? Which is also an issue for the apartment builders. Where are you putting all these boxes that come to this stack of apartments with millennials and empty nesters in it? Where do you store it? Do I need a second concierge person to take the packages, or am I building a storeroom? go back to big data, go back to technology. We now have apps that the concierge can send you an app that says, Bill, you got a package today, we'll store it for 5 days, and it's in locker number 7. We go to locker number 7, we give you a code, you punch it in, you get your thing. We are using data in ways that are making our lives so very different. We are seeing, certainly many of you women know Michael Kors, a very big label. Michael Kors has now said that he believes that internet shopping will cap out at about 20 to 30%. And increasingly, we are seeing companies like Warby Parker, like Bonobos, they came from only online sales. They're now doing in-store sales because they find that both online and in-store sales go up if it's fully integrated. Millennials are seamless. You know, if you're a young person and will have children at some point, your kids may not get a driver's license. They will shop totally differently than what we do. It is the dawning of a new age. Food and beverage is the reason 30% of people of all ages are going to retail centers. 30% are not going to shop. They're going to eat or to drink, or in some cases to watch the NCAA game. So we're seeing that the whole format of shopping centers is now more food and beverage oriented. And it is less of the small boutique shops that can't stay in business. They don't have a big enough internet clientele, but they do have all internet sites. So we're also seeing places like this where the restaurants become again sort of the living room, if you will, of these small apartment buildings. The city becomes the living room because if you're living in 600 or 800 square feet, I don't know about some of you, but if I had the flu and had to be in for a week, I'd be nuts. So I would go out and go to CVS, maybe walking, but go to CVS, Walgreens, etc. Go actually get my milk because, you know, my apartment's not a lot bigger than this and with much lower ceilings. So we are seeing the opportunity for people and restaurants to integrate more fully into the community and be part of almost that Friends TV environment. You know, I grew up in an era where Leave It to Beaver, Ozzie and Harriet, that was what you saw on TV. The millennial generation and Gen X grew up watching Friends, watching Seinfeld. They grew up in an era when they saw apartments, townhouses, studios as the way to live. It's a very different model. So we are seeing that new metropolitan forms are emerging. You still have the city core, where in most cases, not all, the majority of jobs are in the downtown of the city core. You are seeing sub-cities growing much more fully and growing more robustly so that there really is a downtown. You know, Billy and I were talking about midtown development. So you're starting to see a midtown district with offices, residential, retail, really emerging and growing up. That's the form of the future. And how it stays connected is a really interesting question. Again, a lot of studies show that people think differently about an errand versus a trip. If I need to go to Walgreens or if I need to go to the grocery store, largely that's an errand. I want to do it in 15 to 20 minutes, possibly walking, possibly biking. I would not do a skateboard. Possibly getting there in some alternative modality. Could be a bus, but I want to get there in 15 to 20 minutes each way. If I'm going to go 40 minutes, I'm willing to do that for a work-home commute. I'm not willing to do it, by and large, for the errands of my daily life. My doctor, my dry cleaner, where I might get my hair cut, et cetera, et cetera. Daily life, 15 to 20 minutes. Compact communities. Different types of infrastructure than we've seen in the past. So the top drivers of real estate, in our survey we found that you may not see this, but the red number is the public, blue number is everybody we surveyed, the green number is the private sector. What is driving real estate investment? The number one answer was the quality of infrastructure, transportation, telecommunications, Wi-Fi mobility, and access, etc. Everybody altogether said 88% said that was critically important. 91% of the public, 86% of the private sector. Hugely important for ongoing real estate development, which is the economic health of the community in many respects. It reflects the economic health. So beyond that, we see, of course, market demand, availability of a skilled workforce, etc. So we are seeing that one of the key findings is that good infrastructure is critical for where real estate investment dollars go. Think of it yourself. Think about some of these more rural or small town locations. There's not a lot of investment going into those communities. They're not connected. And the places that have managed to do this well, there's a place, Springfield, Massachusetts, which is in the Berkshires, about 3 hours probably out of Boston. There's a 5-college consortium. They used to all be separate colleges. They connected. There's a very good regional medical center. They're connected and have a relationship now to Mass General, to Mass Eye and Ear, to the Boston hospitals, so that that little smaller community is doing okay and gathering investment and gathering some of the boomers who want to live in the Berkshires because it is beautiful, and they're gathering some retail, et cetera. But connectivity is the critical issue, and the relationships to the Papa Boston. So we are seeing this relative to the future economic health of our communities, and a lot of it relates to transportation and infrastructure. And infrastructure, what I would say writ large, if you go back to that first analysis by the American Society of Civil Engineers, that list of infrastructure issues has to be reasonably met. Funding and financing is still seen as a critical issue. We are seeing more and more and more public-private partnerships. We're finishing a book on essentially on public-private partnerships for smaller communities because they need the help in figuring it out, including suburbs. And the issues of ongoing maintenance and repair, operating budgets are critical. So we're seeing new designs. This is how it looks on the design platform. Some of you probably have seen this sort of thing, where you've got places, and this is how it looks when it's built. You've got some parking spots, you've got left turn lanes, you've got some pedestrian safe bulb outs, you've got bicycle paths, you've got walking paths, you've got transit, sidewalks. This is a full street, and this is in an urban area now. And it's the sort of place, and lots of street trees and amenities, that fosters the kind of community that we're talking about, that people want. So we need flexible zoning and regulations, amenities, lots of choice, and we need an urgency. So we also talked in the earlier reception time about how we can get these things done, not just what needs to be done. We tend to be really good at figuring out the technological support. Here is what people need to do. And if only they would do what I tell them to do. How we help them see that this would make sense. How we help them win at it so that they're willing to do it. Because if they're not, it may be the best idea in the world. It isn't going to happen. So I was laughing and suggesting perhaps to Carol and Maybe we should be teaching within the engineering schools political savvy, or building teams and political campaigns that succeed. I mean small p, political, not the kind of stuff we have at the moment. So millennials and boomers are moving. They are moving to all sorts of different places. We need full spectrum housing. By that we mean we need housing for every income group at every age. And we are failing that issue hugely across the country. And if you go back to the numbers I showed about family net worth, about family income, we are in desperate need of full spectrum housing. But the infrastructure can partially offset the high cost of housing. So with that, as this gentleman is coming back, he says, "Sir, the following paradigm shifts occurred while you were out." It's the world we live in. And I would love to take any questions, any thoughts, any arguments you might have.